Hi there, welcome everyone. It's gonna hit my got it button here. All right. Hi Sharon. Hi Valerie. I see Carol. Hey guys. I see Loretta. Hi. Hey, welcome everybody. I just wanted to say happy Friday and give you guys a quick intro. I know a lot of you guys already know the process, but if you're new to our classes, the chat function is the way we communicate. If you want to jump in there and ask questions, feel free to do so. And also, Felicia is here hosting, and if you have any technical difficulties during class or questions, you can reach her in the chat. And there's also, Felicia has posted some instructions for some of the Zoom things, like if you need to move the chat out of the way, you can do that. And you can also mute the chat. So there's lots of different things you can do to make your experience perfect, and ways to change your view and stuff. So any questions you have, feel free to reach out to Felicia in the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and get started here and introduce the project. So today we have our brick stitch bee earrings. And these are really fun. They are a pretty simple design, and I specifically set them up so that I can demo increase and decrease in brick. And just in case, anyone was interested in seeing that, if it's new to anybody. So one of the things that brick stitch, when you first learn it, almost everybody always learns a decrease first. And so this design starts like that. And then it starts changing it up. It starts increasing, and then there's some multiple level decreases where you're skipping more than one brick, more than one thread bridge coming in. So I marked it as intermediate just because some familiarity with a basic brick stitch can help. So we use a lot of terms like thread bridge, and I'll definitely cover those. But if you're having any, if you're trying to follow along, I would say just watch class and then maybe use the replay as a follow along, because I'm going to use lots of jump aheads because there's a lot of stitching going on. And so what I have here on the mat is basically what starts out as a ladder stitch, which is in brick stitch, you always want to work from your widest row. So I'm going to bring the pattern over, and the PDF has the pattern on the last page, but it's also cited throughout. I actually put the pattern in each step so you can see it. But just starting here, if you have a brick stitch pattern, it's brand new, you're just getting started, you always want to look at what's my widest row and use that as your ladder. So your ladder row is going to be your widest row in your design. And sometimes there's more than one. Like this design only has one wide row, but some designs may have more than one. In that case, you just pick one. In this design, it happens to be this one. And so step one is we're going to ladder stitch that row. And then we're going to do a decrease of 3 rows. And I have a jump ahead for that. So I'll probably stitch 1 row, and then I'll use this one to jump ahead so you guys don't have to watch 3 rows being created as a regular decrease. And then we'll jump to our increase. And then after there's an increase, we have 2 more rows of regular decrease. And then there's a real indented decrease. And so we'll jump to that. Then from there, what this design has in the handout as instructions is to leave a super long tail. So you can come back later and use your tail to create the rest of your design. And that's really handy for not having to add thread and not having a super long thread to work with at the start. So I'll show that. And this one's ready to go just to show the double indentations that we got to do to make the bottom of the bee here. So let me go ahead and just for now, I'm going to move these out of the way. We'll need these soon, but not exactly now. Today I'm going to be working with our Delica beads, and I've got some colors: white, a turquoise blue, a black, and a gold. Feel free to change this up. I think in the design originally, the one that I'm wearing, I used the Luminous neon blue. And when I sat down to work, I noticed that that color just wasn't jumping on Zoom on camera. So in this case, I'm working with an opaque turquoise. So feel free to change that up. It looks great too. They both look really nice. And I feel like both of those colors just really pop. So you can choose one of those. Size 10 beading needle. You could use a 12 if you want. I'm going to be using Nymo. I do think you could use Wildfire. What I'm finding though with brick is I have an easier time with just a little bit of a thinner thread. So I'm going to go ahead and work with Nymo, and I'm going to use a little bit of thread magic to soften it, just to make it a little easier to not fray, and it just moves better with that. It's optional if you have it handy and you want to use it. This is at Michael's. You can find it on the tool wall. We're going to need some wire guardians to do the attachment at the top, but you could also just make a little loop of seed beads. And also I wanted to say, in case anyone has questions about the actual substitutions, brick stitch works with lots of beads. So you don't have to use Delicas. Delicas are easier, but you don't have to use Delica. You can use 11-0 rounds. You can even use, 8-0. 10-0 will work great too. But for example, if you wanted to really make a big design, 8-0 would be kind of big. But yeah, you can do that. And then last but not least, another optional thing is to put these super cute tassels at the bottom. So you don't have to do that because, this design works either way. But I thought it was cute. I just thought it looked nice. So, and with bees and tassels, I don't know, it just kind of works. So a little extra there, and I'll show you how to put the tassel on it. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in because there's a lot of steps to cover. I dropped one of my samples there. So in the pattern, it's labeled as A, B, C, and D. And the color, what I usually do when I'm stitching up a design is I will put my colors in that order. So I'll lay out the A and then the B, C, and D. And it just kind of helps for me to keep track of what I'm doing. And there's my C. And last but not least is D. And then for thread, you only need about, I'm going to work with the Nymo. You only need about, I would say, maybe 40 inches. And in the handout, I think that's what I also put there. 40 inches to an arm span is perfect. So for me, 40 inches is about the length if I outstretch my arms almost all the way. I'm going to trim that. These are just some little thread scissors. They're the ones I always use in our classes. And a quick demo of what this stuff does. So this is, you could also use like just a regular beeswax, even like a votive candle, a tea light candle, but this is like a conditioner. And if you push the thread down into it like this and you pull, it gives you the first side. And then I just take my fingers and just come along and take off the excess so I don't get little wax chippings in my stitching. Push it down again. And then for this one, I'll just put a lid on it, make sure it's going through a groove on one side, groove on the other side, and then just pull it. Pull it all the way through. And it's done. And that takes some of the memory off the thread. And it helps with tangles and knots. And when you're working with Nymo, that can be very handy. It also helps with getting it threaded because we don't have our usual trick at our disposal to flatten it with the chain nose plier with this type of thread. So
hey, Danielle, Carmi.
Hey.
Quick question.
Sure.
Was that Nymo B, D, or 0 or O?
Oh, sorry, D.
Thank you.
I'm almost always working with size D thread. That's my personal preference. I don't think it's a requirement for this type of design though, because the Delicas have a really nice generous hole diameter and you can get away with a bigger or a smaller thread. But D is the one that they have at Michael's, and it is also happens to be my favorite. So that's the one I've always got handy. And I'm going to close my keyboard tray because I just have a feeling I'm going to get tangled up in that. So we're going to start with the widest row. And in the handout, what you'll see are some instructions that guide you through what that is. And I popped it out. I kind of cropped it out of the big design so you could focus on it. And so that's what we're going to do first, just ladder stitch that. That's step one there. And I've got it off camera. I'm looking at it here as I go. But so to ladder stitch, you want to pick up the first two beads in your pattern, which for us is A and B. So pick that up in that order, an A and a B. And then go ahead and bring that down just to the midpoint of your thread, because remember, we're going to work with some extra right at the bottom to use later. So bring it to your midpoint and then come back up through the A bead. That's the first bead we strung. And pull tight. And so what'll happen is your beads, they're going to sit side by side like that. And I just go through it one more time to reinforce it. So with ladder stitch, a lot of people like to like stitch the whole thing and then come back through it again. And I used to do it that way. That was kind of my go-to. I have a new way now that I just decided I liked, and I'm going to share that one today. So there's a reinforced one. And now I need to travel through my blue bead because my next bead needs to be attached to my blue bead. Okay. So ladder the next one by picking up the next bead in your row and then come down through the last bead that you strung and pull tight. And again, it sits really nicely right next to the last one, but I'm going to go back through it and do my reinforcing now instead of later. And one of the reasons I like to do that is not only does it save me a trip back, but it keeps my thread working on the opposite side of my tail thread. And then maybe another third reason is that when you've waxed your thread, the ladder stitch doesn't get as tight easily. And so that's another way to solve that problem. So all I'm doing is picking up a bead and going through the last bead and then coming up through that bead that I just strung again, and then looping back through them an additional time. And I'm going to do that for that whole row. And so in that row, I've got, looks like I've got 6 blue beads that in total that I need to do, and then 2 gold, 6 more blue, and then 1 white. So I'll just speed up just a little bit. Use my reinforcing step. And with this kind of stitching, you will get faster as you go. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how I hold the work. Once you have something to hold on to, so after you've got like 4 beads maybe, it gets a lot easier. The hardest part of ladder stitching for me is those first 3 beads. So everything's wonky, everything's moving around. But once you've got this to hold on to, you can hold it with the threads kind of like up and down. So let me try to get that right. So I'm pinching it kind of like that, which is also keeping it in a straight line. And that reinforcing that we've been doing is really making that a nice tight ladder. So anyone who's struggling with getting, like wonky ladder stitch, just reinforcing it in time is a really helpful way to solve that. I need 1 more blue. And again, I'm just pinching it like this. And you're always coming back up in the opposite direction from whatever side that thread is exiting. I'll put a knot there. And see how loose, super loose, until I pull and reinforce it. And there we go. So there's 6 of those blue beads. Double check that. And now I'm going to switch to the color D, which is our gold. And again, just going back through in the opposite direction of that exiting thread. Reinforcing it. 1 more gold bead. Reinforce. And now I need 6 of my blue beads. And it's just going to come along a little slowly, but this is probably I feel like it's the most time consuming part, but it's worth seeing because it's also the part that a lot of people struggle with when they're starting out. So just in case we have anyone new that's maybe been deterred from trying stitches like this because of laddering, I thought I'll go ahead and just work through the whole row and we can see how it looks, how it looks in process, right? So you can see my stitches are not straight until I do that loop back through. So here's my first loop. And you know, it's okay, but it's not perfect, right? It's just kind of wonky and it loosens up very readily. But then when I make this extra pass, much better. And the camera is struggling a little bit with focus today. I think I need to get my arm out of the field of view there. There's one. Okay, I need 2 more blue beads. And this does kind of, it sets you up for a lot of different kinds of stitches. So today we're doing brick, but this is also the base stitch for things like herringbone. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm counting them just to make sure. And so now I need one more color A. And I'm not sure I understood the question there on the second row. I'm getting to the second row coming up. We don't really do a second pass on the second row. This looping around thing that I'm doing here is just in the latter row. And I'm only doing it because I want my design to stay, you know, in a straight line. So what a lot of people do is they do that stitch that I just did, but they do it without that extra looping through. And here at this step, they would come back through every single one. And we've done that in previous classes and it totally works. I just did a little differently today because just to show you something new. And also just because I'm loving on how this looks and the time save of it. And it's a lot more satisfying to have something that's coming together less wonky in process. It can just be a little distracting and discouraging if something's wiggly and loose for this many stitches, right? So that just makes it easier. We do have some thickness to work with. So we've got double layers of thread on our first row that we've got to come under for our brick. So while I've got this here, I want to explain thread bridging just really quick for anyone who's new. All of those stitches we just did, those created a bridge. So basically the thread that's joining one bead to the next, top and bottom, is created what we call a thread bridge. And all that is this little jump of thread from each bead to the next. And it's a great place to anchor. So when you pick up your next bead, you go under it. And it has the effect of stacking whatever bead you add on top of that thread bridge. And that's why they look like a little brick. And I think it's the name, where the name comes from. Each of the beads is stacked on top of the other one, kind of centered above 2 below. And so this introduces the next step. What we do in brick stitch to add a new bead is each new bead is placed in the thread bridge that is below it. So when we start the next row, we just finished this one, right? What we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting an A bead on top of the A and B bead below it. So whenever you're trying to figure out like what thread bridge should I use in a brick stitch design, all you got to do is take a look at where the center is here. So the thread bridge that joins this A and the B, I know I need my A to sit on top of that one. That concept comes in really handy later when we're trying to figure out where to put our decreases. So for example, when we get up here and a typical decrease would place our first bead in the first thread bridge, but this one is a double decrease. So we want to place our first bead in the second thread bridge. And down here it gets even worse. We're placing it in the third thread bridge. So we're going to go over that step by step. But I'm going to introduce just a regular single decrease row coming up right here. So the only thing you need to worry about is what color bead do I need to put where? And in this case, our next row is just a repeat with a bead, and then we have 6 B beads. And we have a center that is a C, 6 more of our B beads and then 1A. And each row will have 1 less bead than the one before it if you're decreasing in this method. So there's 2 ways you can do this. A lot of people like to do the pick up 2 beads and go onto the second thread bridge method. That works. But I have been really loving on this other method. And it only, the only catch is you need to work with a thread that kind of matches the bead color you're using, because the thread will show on the side, but it makes the beads sit really nice and centered. And it helps you with visualizing where to start each bead for rows that are not normal decreases. So I'm going to show you both. I'm going to show you how this looks, and then I'll take it apart and show you the other way. So method 1, the one probably most folks do, is you pick up your first 2 beads of the row. So for us, that's an A and a B. And we're going to go ahead and remember, we want A bead to sit above the first thread bridge and B bead to sit above the second. So we've got 2 beads in our hands. So we're going under that second thread bridge. And it works out really nicely with Delicas. They tend to sit side by side without a lot of effort. There's a way to straighten it out if they don't. But so you see how they're kind of, the one on the side is not sitting flush. And we want it to do that, right? So you can go back through it, come under the first thread bridge, and it's a little hard to see, but you come back down through this first bead. I'll just go ahead and do that. And then come up underneath the thread bridge that is above those first 2 beads. So I just went underneath that thread bridge, the very first thread bridge there. And then you pull tight, not too tight, but just a little bit, and come up through the B bead. And then just kind of use your thumbnail to tighten it down. So there's method 1. And that does a nice job getting your beads to sit side by side like that. If you wanted to try something different, let me pull my needle off really quick. Using this side, this is good for if you ever have an error that you need to pull out. Use the eye side of your needle and kind of take that bead and just nudge it up so you can see what's going on underneath it. And you can get your thread out. So it's kind of an extreme destruct, but, and now I know that the next path I took was coming up through this side. So again, I'm just going to loosen that. Loosen that bead there and try to get my thread out from under it. And this is just because I want to show you that other method, which I happen to like a lot right now. So that one's coming this way. My destruct went a little smoother when I was doing it yesterday, but I did practice this. There we go. I'm gonna pull that thread out. And now I should be able to get both of those beads off there. Okay. So back where we started, back at the ladder row, let me show you method 2. And if you get a little fraying, if you have, for example, if at any point in your design, you feel like, I'm not really feeling like this is working out for me, try reconditioning your thread. And all I did was I just kind of slid that along. Okay, so here's method 2. Is anyone out there using those big eye needles, I wonder? I have been starting to try them out. I feel like they're kind of challenging with brick stitch, but I'm curious what everyone else thinks. Because they get thicker in the middle. So with brick, you need a lot of, I feel like it doesn't make it as easy to work with. But it works great for things like herringbone. So maybe. All right. Method 2. Sorry about the delay there. So with method 2, you just pick up one bead. And the one bead goes right where you see it in the diagram. And so for us, that's just right above the A and the B beads from the row below. So you can kind of like think of it as like, hey, this line right here, that's my thread bridge, the line. So it's going to sit right there. And so to do that, and that's what's diagrammed here on the second page of the handout, is coming under that first thread bridge. And when you pull that, the bead's going to sit kind of sideways, but just a little, and come back up through it. And check this out. I'm going to use my thumbnail to tighten it. Automatically just pops, like just right into place there. So the bonus is it's automatically shaped like perfectly. You don't have to do the back turn thing where you go back through the last bead under the thread bridge. You don't have to find a hidden thread bridge, none of that. But the downside, the thread is showing on the side. You can see it right there. But if you look really closely at a lot of the beautiful beadwork on like social media and stuff, if you look, or and I've actually bought some work that artists I admire have created because I just wanted to see like how is their stitching done. A lot of them do this, and a lot of them have their thread showing on the side. And I've looked at those pictures 100 times and never noticed it. So just think about like, hey, what do I like? What style feels good to my hands while I'm stitching? Because you're doing this for a long time, and you've got to enjoy the process, right? And sometimes you just need to change it up. If you've been doing it the other way for a long time, switching it can make it interesting again. So what I did here is now I'm just going off with the rest of the row. I have picked up the next bead that I need in my pattern, and I've gone under the second thread bridge. And for me, that's easy to visualize too. You don't have to think about it, especially when we get to the decrease rows where there's more than one indent going on. It saves you having to worry about, I've picked up 2 beads and I got to calculate in my head now kind of like where I need to be with 2 beads in play. I feel like that is actually more challenging, right? Sorry, I've got a little tangle there. Let me go back through that. There we go. My long tail is in the way of progress here. Okay. Got myself in a tangle. There we go. Okay, so I'm adding that second bead. I went under the second thread bridge there. And the next thing I'm going to do is just come up through that second bead. Hopefully. There we go. And so increasing, don't worry, I'll show you that. But increasing is definitely more intuitive than I thought. When I was playing around with it, I was like, hey, man, we will get there though. So I'm just going to show a few more stitches. How does everyone feel about the simple 1 bead decrease? It's something we've done a lot. We did a whole class on it. Actually, we did a couple classes where we used this method. We made like a diamond shaped pendant once that had charms on it. So there's my third bead. I'll put on one more here. And so I was going to just see if anyone wants to see that again. I'll continue through this row and create a second one. But if everyone's feeling good about it, I can jump ahead to a sample where I have finished all of the simple rows. Okay, so I've got at least one request for yes again. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this row really quick and then start the next one. And if you guys are cool with it, I might use my favorite method or my currently favorite method, which will probably change back and forth. But at the moment, it's the one I'm inspired by. So all I'm doing here is I'm just following my pattern. I've got the pattern open here off camera, and I'm looking at it just to see what my next color bead is. And so I've got 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blue beads. I need one more blue bead, and then I need a color C. I'm going to do that one. And then become underneath the center one here. And 6 more blue. I'm just going to go a little faster if that's okay. I lost a little time with my tangles. And actually, if you guys wouldn't mind, someone could jump in the chat and tell me which method would you like to see for the next round. I could do my favorite, or I could do the other one. So the 2 beads started the 1. I feel like the 1 is easier, but I could be wrong. One bead. All right, let's do the 1 bead, my favorite. Thank you. Yeah, I like that one. Okay, so here's the last bead of the row here, which is an A bead. I'm just going to come up through that bead. Okay. And there's that row all finished. And so I'm going to start the next row. And again, it's just a single decrease. So we're just going to start with 1, the first bead in our pattern. So 1 A bead. And we're going to go under the first thread bridge. And then come back up through that bead. Use your thumbnail to kind of create some tension there. And it just pops right in place, which is great. And then when you put on the next bead, it just really makes it absolutely perfect. Our tail thread is it's getting in the way a little bit, but not too bad. You can take another needle, thread that on your tail, and get it to face downward, which will help. And I believe I did that in process on my last couple. But yeah, so there's that row. And I think what I need to do now is go ahead and jump to my next one. So what happened here is I completed the first 3 regular rows. So we just did this one together. That was the second row. And we just started the first 2 beads of this third row. And it's the same process, just to keep going here and then just create the other row. So that's what's done on this sample. So you can see you've got the widest row here, and I just completed right up to the next one. Let me hold this a little closer. So if we keep going, regular decreases, you'll get to this spot right here. And now we've got to do an increase. And what an increase looks like, I'm gonna bring up the handout here. Our next row, the increase is that bead is gonna hang over. And so there's no thread bridge to put our A bead in. So what we have to do is pick up 2 beads for this one. And then we add it under the first thread bridge, which is a traditional increase method. So actually not too difficult. And then when we get to the end of that row, I'll show how to add on that extra bead that hangs on the side. Let's do that really quick. Let me get my thread ready here. And we're ready to increase. So the same pattern following, all you need to do is, oh, and I see the question about left and right. I do struggle with that. To avoid it, I completely devised a pattern that's symmetrical and has no left or right. So no matter what side you're working from, you're going to be okay. But it was totally a cheat. And yes, if you're working with a pattern that has a left and a right, you have to use your tail as your marker. And that's really the only way I know how to do it. But yeah, for this pattern, not as big a deal. I didn't think I could keep up with left and right on a live. I was worried. So yeah, I took a shortcut. But so yep, we're gonna do an increase. We got the first 2 beads in the pattern row, which if you are, let's see if you're following in the handout, is an A and a B bead that are just gonna hang over here on the side. Okay. So I've got my A and my B, and I'm gonna go under the first thread bridge. Oops. All right. And so when you do that, that's it. That's all you gotta do. Check that out. And that works for some reason. I don't know why, but it does. You don't even have to reinforce it. It just works out. So I'm gonna keep going here. Let's look at my next pattern row. Gotta do 4 B's. So I'm just gonna kind of speed through that if that's okay, so we can get to the end and I can show adding the next one. So there's my 4 B beads. I need 1 A bead. And then I need 2 C. Another A. And then I need 4 of these color B. All right, so I've got my last color B, my last 4 color B. And now I'm here, right? And I'm stuck. I don't have a thread bridge, but I need to put on 1 more A. So we're just gonna ladder it. Just go ahead and grab your A and go back through the B bead. And go ahead and reinforce that 1 time. So back through the A bead and back through the B bead. Use your thumbnail, tighten that up. And you should have something that looks like that. increase. And that's how to do a single increase. And so once you've done that, the next step in our pattern, so you do this increase row, right? We did our adding on, and now we have a few more rows to complete before we get to the next decrease and putting on the wire guardian, which I do want to show. So we just did this row right here, which is this overhang one. And we need to do one more decrease and another that is also just a regular single decrease. So what I did is I have a sample that's worked to that point, so you guys don't have to watch me stitch 2 regular rows. So I'm going to show them next to each other so you can see what we're doing. There's our whitest row. I'm matching those up. Here's where we left off. We just finished our increase row. And so you see here, there's another decrease row and another decrease row, regular single decrease, just like we just showed. So jumping from this to that. And all we have next to do is this part. We've got to put on 4A and then do this jump and then put on 4A and add our wire guardian. So just real quick, again, throw my needle on here. There we go. All right. So we've got our thread exiting from the edge bead there. That's the one on the edge. And then over here on our pattern, I need to put my next bead above my second thread bridge. So I'm going to weave out of this bead, down through the next one, up through the third bead, and then I'm going to use the single add method to put that one right above the second thread bridge. And it's just kind of just weaving around, it's thread pathing, right? So here we are, we're at our exit there. Down through the middle bead here. Up through the third bead. Get our first bead for this row, which is 1A. And we want it to sit, right? We want it to sit right above that second thread bridge. So coming underneath the second thread bridge there. And up. And up through here. There it is, right where we want it, sitting right over the second one. I need to put 3 more. I'm going to add these the regular way. Pick up a bead, go through the next thread bridge. So for me, that's the third thread bridge here. I'm just being careful not to puncture my thread. I've been doing that a little bit, and I think it's what causes my fraying and my knots is when I accidentally move too quickly and just kind of put my needle through it. So sometimes I'll let it be loose, right? So that I know I didn't puncture it. Like that, right? I find myself doing that a lot. I don't know if that'll help anybody, but I thought I'd share it really quick. There's my 4th bead. Okay. So there's bead number 4. And I want to skip a center bead. And now if this is, if you don't like this, I wanted to show real quick on one of my earrings. I didn't do that on one of my earrings. I just kept going with all white beads. You can do that if you want. I'm going to show how I did this, where there's a little gap there, see? Because it looks cute, why not, right? And I didn't put the wire guardian on until after I finished the row, but you could put it on here. I'm going to finish the row and come back. But so we need to, first thing we need to do is get over here. So what I did, and let me bring the diagram back because it's going to be hard to see, is from here, I just went down through these 2 and came back up. Now my thread does show in between these 2. You could do a more complicated weaving path if you wanted to, but it looks nice anyway, and it also locks them down so that they don't sit sideways. So that is what I did here. I just went ahead and jumped down into that bead. Oh, sorry about that. So I jumped from, here's my thread exiting from my 4th bead, and I just jumped down through that one and came up through the next one. Just that bead right there. And then repeat what I did before on this side. Pick up 1A bead. Go through the next thread bridge here. Come through that bead. And there's our space. There's our little gap. So if you wanted to right now, you could go ahead and do your wire guardian. I'm going to finish the row and just come back. There's 1. Here's 2 and 3. All right. There it is. Super cute. Wire guardian right here, ready to go. Let's head back that way. I'm gonna go down, up, and down. And I'm gonna go down to the next bead here just to get me where I need to be. And again, if you wanted to save yourself that weaving around, you can do your wire guardian at the middle of that row. And it just actually works great both ways. So whichever one you like. So I went through one side of the wire guardians have holes, you know, on one side and the other. And then there's this kind of like a little rainbow well that you have to make sure your thread stays in. I usually just pinch it between my fingers to make sure that it stays there. And come down through this one on the other side, this bead over here. And there's the wire guardian. And so to reinforce that path, a couple things you can do. Here's what I did. I just went down through the bead below it. So this is the black bead, the first part of the antler there, antenna. Went through that side. Up through this one, which is the one adjacent to it. And then through my bead where my wire guardian is sitting on top of. Straight through the wire guardian. Up and over. And down through the bead on that side. At this point, your wire guardian is going to start to get super tight. But the good news is this earring is very lightweight. And reinforcing it just that many times it's actually fine. So all you got to do is weave in now. And to weave in, all you'll want to do is just kind of bring your thread through a few beads, change direction a couple times, and trim it. And in the interest of time, I won't go through all that, but you just basically start stitching through, maybe turn, come up, turn, come down, trim it, and you're good. So from here, you probably would start running out of working thread. So you wove that in, you trimmed it, and now you've got this extra long tail on this side to start working the bottom half of your design. And so the bottom half is this one. So we have this row shown here, right? That row is this row. And all we got to do is some decreases. These are regular decreases, 1, 2, and 3. And so I did that already on this sample. I took that one to where it has those 3 decreases done. So that's ready to go. And let me just get my needle. And the next thing you'll have to do after that is this double decrease. And it's the same, You know, the same process that we did before when we were doing our, you know, our decrease up here. It's the same thing that we did here at the top. I'm just going to show it really quick. You get that tassel on there. And I'll let you guys get to stitching. So this row, and this row, they're done. I need to add this row, which is 3 A's, 4 D's, and 3 A's. I need to get to my second thread bridge because that's where the first bead is built off of, right? Built off my second thread bridge above that A and B bead there. So same thing we did before. I just come down through the next bead in the row and then up through the one that's adjacent to that. Grab one A bead and put that under the second thread bridge in that row. And then when you pull tight, it should sit kind of wonky like that. Come up through it. Use your thumbnail to kind of pull. And there it's right where we want it. And I'm going to add 2 more. Just keeping the row going. The good news is this is a super short row. Second bead always helps that first bead kind of just be a little better. Here's my third A. And I need to do 4D. There's one. And I apologize, guys. I might go over by my estimation. I think I'm going to go over by about 5 minutes. I hope that's okay. But do you know there's a replay for anyone who has got time sensitive day? Feel free to jump out and there will be a replay posted. It'll probably be up on Tuesday. But I'm going to go speedy through this row really quick here. There's my 4th color D. And I'm going to do 3A. And I'm going to show you that really big decrease. And that's really the last skill that we had to introduce, really. So that's coming up really soon. There's 2 and 3. Okay, that row's done. And now we have this really big decrease to do. And it's, we finished this row right here, right? Now we need to build one where the first bead is actually sitting on the 3rd. So there's 1, 2, 3. That's a 3rd thread bridge. And I'm just basically counting the lines between the beads. We need to put an A bead there. And it's actually done the same way, and it's a little easier to get to. So I'm just coming down through the adjacent bead from where I'm exiting, back up through the next one. And I'm actually right where I need to be. I'm just going to put it through this thread bridge instead of going back one, just going forward one, right? So grab your A bead and put it in the 3rd thread bridge there. And again, the way that you figure out where is just by looking at that pattern, just by looking at it and seeing 1, 2, and 3. Just counting it. For some reason, I like to work from my left hand to my right hand, but there's really no rhyme or reason to that. It just seems to be how I always do it. And the next beads that I need are going to be 3C and then 1A, and this row is done. And the next ones are even shorter, so we'll get those really quick. Put our tassel on, and I'll let you guys go. There's one more. And this is where it starts to get exciting because you're almost done and it's starting to actually take shape and you can see the pretty design popping out. All right, that row is done. Next row is just a regular decrease with only 4 beads in it. It's got 2 Ds in the center, surrounded by A's. And I purposely put the white colors around it like an outline. All I did that for was to hide my thread. So there's 1 bead going under the first thread bridge. Come up to that bead. And put it down. And then I need my D bead here. It just pops right in place. Here's my next D bead. And this part is pretty quick. It's just building that last little row. Almost there. This one just has 3 beads in it. I picked up my first bead, which is the A. Coming up under that first thread bridge. One of my C beads. One A bead. And there we go. Okay. So now all we have to do is put 2A on the bottom. I'm going to grab a tassel. These pretty tassels come in a ton of colors. You can use whichever one you like. I'm going to go with this bright orange. So it's handy. It's right here. And I'm going to remove this little thing here. So I did have a great question from Pat. Oh, and by the way, Pat, thank you for the gifts. Carmi told me that you left a real cool tool for us, and I wanted to say a personal thank you for that. I didn't catch if Pat was here. I know there's some internet trouble, so I'm not sure if you guys are, if Pat's here, but I know you guys will get the message to her. But she had asked me a question about the jump rings. You don't have to use 2 jump rings. It comes with 2, and I think I just lazied and just didn't feel like even making a change, so I just went with it. But you can take one of those jump rings off, and you can put your stitch directly through this bottom jump ring if you want to. So fully up to you. I'm just going to go with what's here. I'm going to go ahead and pick up my first bead. So that's my A bead. And under the first thread bridge, again, same thing we've been doing. And then up through that bead. Make that tight. And then just before I add my next bead, I'm going to go through my jump ring here. Pick up my next bead. And brick stitch that one right in place. So now my jump ring's on there, and I'm just going to reinforce a couple of times that stitch, but you want to make sure when you've done this that it sits in the right spot. So give it a pull so that it's on the right side of your Delica. Mine is not. Mine's jumped. There we go. Another way you could do it is go ahead and finish the row and then just add your, you can add your jump ring. But the reason I did it this way is that it's going to, none of my threads will be on the inside of that jump ring, right? It's a little trickier that way, but I feel like it helps. But you could finish the row and then just stitch it on too. So whichever works for you. This is just a little trickier, but then all the threads are going through the jump ring. There's none that aren't going through it. So that's why I chose to do it that way, but it's not required. You can do it whichever way. Go through here and reinforce it, and then we're done. So go through jump ring, and back up through the last bead here. And whew, we made it. I'm doing one more little loop through. Go back up through that bead. And through the center bead here. I'm going to pull on my tassel while I do that and make it tighter. So what do you guys think? There's our bee. He's connected. And he's ready. You just need to weave in your thread the usual way, like that we do it, and put on a ear wire, and you're good to go. And you can make all different colors if you want. Like the wings could be many colors. You could even match the tassels. Become lots of great things there. So that's the brick stitch bees. And if you love these kind of patterns, I'm getting really into it, and I might be posting some extra patterns. I've got a bunch of ideas that I want to try. So if I can get them to work, I'll share them for sure. All right. So thanks, guys. That was like a whirlwind. But if you are free next week, I'll show you next week's class is our ring. So this is going to be another really fun one. And then after that, we've got our workshop, which is these beautiful flower bracelets. So, and of course, I keep forgetting to mention the 23rd is the World Jewelry Day. So it's a full day of classes from lots of instructors that Michael's is hosting for us. And it's wonderful. It's got, I'm doing some really simple stringy bracelets that are going to be fun to do and see. And I know that a lot of the other instructors have some great stuff planned. So check out the 23rd on michaels.com/classes. And so I know I've gone over a bit here, but not quite 5 minutes. Oh, it's only 1:02 of my time. So, oh, wow. Hey, Valerie, you got it done. That's awesome. Yay. Okay, awesome, guys. Hey, have a great weekend. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next week. So, oh, thanks, Valerie. Hearts. Thanks, Loretta. Bye, guys. Bye, Sharon.